I am just a couple of minutes early. I'm checking all my technology since I'm trying a slightly different location at work with my hover cam. So if you can hear me, can you please say in the chat that you can hear me? Because I'm not sure if you can actually hear me or not. Awesome, thank you. Fantastic. All right, we are going to give it just a couple minutes as we wait for some people to come in, because I wasn't supposed to start for about 2 more minutes. But the choir concert got done earlier than I thought it would, and I was able to get over here and get everything set up. I have my spiral with me today. Oh, let's fix that. We don't want that happening. There, that should be locked now. I've got my spiral with me today, so I would recommend having your spiral. We will go over through the spiral information. So we're going to be starting on page 37 with our Unit 3 TEACS questions. Okay. All right, guys, as always, if we could make sure that the chat is for the purpose of asking questions and not for socializing, you can host your own live for hanging out and chatting with each other. All right, here we go. It's 6:45 p.m. This is our Unit 3 review. I want to just go over these questions. Now, it doesn't seem like a lot of questions, but we have a test that's the same length as the test we've been having. So there's going to be a lot of questions on some of these. So it says, what are the causes of the American Revolution? What are the different tax acts, and how did the colonists react to each one? We're going to be looking at our thermometer notes to get that information. So what roles did the following people play? And then it lists all those individuals. We'll be looking at the back of our thermometer notes for that one. How did the First Great Awakening help to cause the American Revolution? Now, realize that was in a previous unit. First, we actually covered the Great Awakening in our last unit. So we'll be going back into our last unit to look at the Great Awakening again and remind us of that. How is the Boston Tea Party an example of civil disobedience? What were the causes and effects of the Boston Tea Party? So we're going to look at what came right before the Boston Tea Party and what came right after, looking specifically at the Boston Tea Party on our thermometer. Okay, and then what role did economics play in causing the American Revolution? And consider things like salutary neglect, mercantilism, and taxation. So we'll be looking at these 3 things. Salutary neglect and mercantilism have been in every single unit so far. They were in Unit 1, Unit 2, and then Unit 3. So we'll go back and we'll look at those things as well, make sure we understand them. And then what were the causes and effects of the French and Indian War? So we'll look at our French and Indian War notes with that. So we're going to start by just kind of going through the spiral. You should have a French and Indian War set of notes that just kind of goes through the 2 sides of the war, French and Indians versus the British and the colonists, and then why they were all fighting. And it really boils down to France was trying to get the same land as the colonists. France and colonists wanted the same piece of land. So you have, here's the Appalachian Mountains. And this was all French. And this was all British. And this right here is essentially the Ohio River Valley. And the French are coming in here. And the British are coming in here. And they get to a fight over it. And that's called the French and Indian War. Okay. And the British win, but they're not going to really get what they want. So part of the French and Indian War is the Albany Plan of Union. One thing I noticed as we were reviewing today is that the Albany Plan of Union, people were thinking that that had to do with the revolution. is with the French and Indian War. So there's that Join or Die cartoon, which is the chopped up snake, and it's sending that message. It's sending that message of, hey, everybody needs to join the Albany Plan of Union so that the French don't beat us up. Because if we don't all unify, then the French are going to win. And they don't say that. They say, no, we don't want to unify. They win. France loses all its land. And in order to keep peace with the Native Americans, okay, they create the Proclamation Line in 1763. So in 1763, they win. The French are now gone. Okay, and technically all of this belongs to the British now. But obviously, you still have a lot of Native Americans, okay, living on this side. And the British don't want to, the King of England does not want to pay to fight the British. I mean, the Indians. So he doesn't want to pay to fight the Native Americans. So they create the Proclamation Line of 1763. So notice how this treaty and the Proclamation Line are in the same year. So that's the end of the French and Indian War, okay? 1763 is the end of the French and Indian War. And remember, you have two sort of points of view on this, okay, on the Proclamation Line. The British point of view is we don't want to fight the Native Americans. And the colonial point of view, the colonists, is some of us already live there. Lance, yes. So they were already in debt. So they had already paid all this money and all this money and all this money, and they didn't want to have another war and keep fighting. And the Native Americans pretty much straight up said, we're not going to stop fighting you. We don't care if the French are gone. We're not going to stop fighting you. So the British were like, you know what? We don't really care that much. We're out. Tell the colonists they can't go over there. We don't want to fight with the Native Americans. And the colonists like, some of us already live there. So they already claimed the land. Okay, so they already claimed the land. And so they're like, that's not fair. Some of us have already moved over here. We fought for this. We died for this. We believe we should be able to go over there. The colonists don't want to be friends with the Native Americans. There's no plan for the colonists to be like, well, let's just share the land. No, the colonists believe that is their land. They fought for it. They died for it. Who cares about the Native Americans? We should have that land. Okay, so those are the 2 points of view on the Proclamation Line of 1763. So that's part 1 of the significance, because there's really 2 things that come out of the French and Indian War, okay? So if you think of the French and Indian War equals 2, because there's 2 effects. One is the Proclamation Line, and the other one is taxes. Okay, so F&I has 2 effects. You remember it has 2 letters, so it has 2 effects. The F&I war has 2 effects. Okay, so the other effect is that England is in debt. So England spends all this money on the war, and then they have no more money. And in fact, not only do they not have any money, they have they have a huge debt. Okay. They owe people money. So the King of England is all like, well, what should I do? Okay. And so he decides to pass taxes. Now, we're using a very simple language right now. Taxes get me money. Other words that mean money might be revenue, income. Okay, so if they're talking about money, they might use the words revenue, they might use the word income. Okay. But he's thinking about taxes. So then we have, on taxes, we have 2 points of view as well, okay? So again, here's the British point of view. They think the colonists started the war, so they should pay for it. Okay? We spent all that money defending you, so you should help pay for it. And it's very seems very logical to them. The colonists, on the other hand, have a different point of view, which is you can't tax us if you don't let us vote. We have rights. Okay? You can't tax us if you don't let us vote. We have rights. You guys, it's not that they didn't like paying the money. Okay? Obviously, they didn't like paying the money. But the problem isn't that. The problem is we should be able to vote on these taxes. We should have a voice in our government. We are English citizens. They thought of themselves as English citizens. Okay? So how dare you take away our rights? Rights that are listed in the English Bill of Rights. Rights that are guaranteed to us in the Magna Carta. Exactly. And that's why they say no taxation without representation. Their tax phrase isn't stop taxing us. Their catchphrase isn't taxes are evil. Their catchphrase isn't all taxes are theft. Their catchphrase is no taxation without representation. So it really comes down to us, you can't tax us if you don't let us vote. We have rights. So that's the two effects that come out of the French and Indian War. So once again, French and Indian War, the French and the Indians versus the British and the colonists. Okay? They're fighting over the Ohio River Valley, the ORV. Ohio River Valley. And Ben Franklin has the Albany Plan of Union. Okay, that's Ben Franklin's plan to unite the colonies. And in order to get people to join his plan, he creates the Join or Die cartoon. And France loses all of its land, and they issue the Proclamation Line of 1763. There's two effects, and those two effects are the Proclamation Line and taxes. Okay, and the Proclamation Line, the British say we don't want to fight with the French, and the colonists say, we really already have that land. We claim that land, okay? And then on the taxes, the British say, we fought that war to protect you. You should pay those taxes. And the colonists say, you can't tax us if you don't let us vote. So next in our spiral, there should be a couple warm-up. And yes, guys, if you are in a different class than my students, your spiral may look slightly different than my students, but this is just what's in our spiral. So those were our reasons for colonization one. But let's take a look just really quickly in this throwback about the influential documents from history. Okay, so this was a couple weeks ago, 923 to 927. And on this one, on the English Bill of Rights, one of the answer was the statement above influenced colonist beliefs that they should be treated as full citizens of England with the same rights. Okay, one of the things you'll see a lot in like when they talk about the Virginia House of Burgesses is the fact that the Virginia House of Burgesses writes about how they are citizens of England. And when you're a citizen of England, you have rights. Page 41 is the copy of the district checkpoint. That's not going to be super useful for you. Page 42 should be your causes little workbook with the cover. You picked one of the topics. Okay. And then Some of my students, we did a vocabulary exercise. Some of my students had to write the vocabulary down and some did not. So whether you have any actual vocabulary in there will probably depend on that. But I just want to go over a couple of these words. Most of y'all did really well on the vocabulary exercise, and you seem to really understand the words already, but just in case. So monarch is the king or queen. So if you see the word monarch, okay, you could think the monarch, you can draw like it's wearing a crown. Okay, the O is wearing a crown. The tyrant is like a horrible monarch. Okay, so they're a cruel, unlimited leader. Okay, and we call George III a tyrant. He's an example of a tyrant. Redcoats is a nickname for the British soldiers. So if you see the phrase redcoats, they're talking about the British soldiers. Boycott, this is a big one. Okay, you're very likely to see this on the test. A boycott is just when you refuse to buy something. This is used over and over again. It is like the #1 go-to tool for the colonists in reaction to the taxes. So if they see a tax they don't like, they're going to boycott that stuff. They see a tax they don't like, they're going to boycott that stuff. Parliament, this confuses a lot of people. Yeah. Parliament, this confuses a lot of people. Parliament is, so you have two things ruling England, the king and Parliament. And Parliament makes the laws and the king approves them. And the king will tell Parliament what laws to make a lot of times. Okay, so Parliament is making the laws. They're actually the ones who are signing the tax laws. The king says, hey, tax these things, and the Parliament signs it. Revenue is just another word for income. So if you see revenue, you need to put dollar signs, okay? Propaganda is biased materials that try to convince you to join their side. Minutemen and militia are going to be words that are more for the actual revolution than for right now. Repeal, that is when they take a law back. They say, we have this Sugar Act, and then everybody boycotts sugar, and nobody will buy sugar. So the people who sell sugar are all like, hey, you need to get rid of that tax because no one's buying my sugar. So they repeal the tax, they take it back. Okay. And then a petition is one way that people will protest is they'll write a letter and they'll request an official request, and then everybody will sign it. Like if you started a petition to change the dress code, you would write an official request to the school board to change the dress code, and you'd get as many people as you could to sign the request. Okay, so the big ones for this test are monarch, tyrant, boycott, Parliament, and revenue. I think these are the really big ones for this particular test. Okay, repeal and propaganda. Okay, the other ones will be more useful for the next test. All right, here's the big one. Probably 80 to 85% of the test is on these notes right here. Okay, these giant thermometer notes with a gajillion pieces of information. I counted up, I think there are 17 events on the front and 10 people on the back. Okay. All right, so there's 17 events on the front and 10 people on the back. So Chloe, I think revenue is likely to be on the test. Okay, I'm gonna, hold on. Okay, so Parliament is definitely on the test. Okay, and remember that's the people who just make the laws. The word policy, so policy is a practice that a government has. Okay, the word liberty, which means freedoms or rights. Okay, privileges, immunities. Like if you see lists like privileges, immunities, liberties, those are words that just mean, okay, Superboss, I will not say how many questions it is. No, you cannot use notes. Okay. Okay. The word lodging just means like to live somewhere, somewhere you're going to sleep for the night. If I'm in need of lodging, I can go to the hotel. Let's see. Boycott is on here. It's definitely going to be on there. Tyrant. Make sure you still know what a barrier is. Okay, and that's really the big ones, it looks like. Okay. All right, so here we go. Sorry. All right. So the way the thermometer works, I've noticed a lot of students have been a little confused about the thermometer. The thermometer is a timeline. It starts at the bottom and goes up. So this is first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th. And then we go to war. Okay. So all of these events are leading to war. Okay. All of these events are leading to war. I can't tell you which ones are on there and which aren't, but let me hit some of the highlights. Okay. Proclamation line is 1763. Obviously, this is important because we learned about it in the French and Indian War, and we learn about it again now. It's the first step. Okay. So let's put like first right here. Okay. And then over by the Declaration of Independence. Okay. Let's put last. All right. So then the first tax we see is the Sugar Act. And how do they react to that? Well, they have the committees of correspondence. And we're going to start having boycotts right here, okay? So I'm going to put boycotts all along the side here because there's boycotts during this whole time period. They boycott everything. Every time there's a tax, they're like, oh, boycotting that. Oh, boycotting that. Oh, boycotting that. Okay? So they're using boycotts repeatedly throughout. And then we have, so the Sugar Act, the Quartering Act. This is, if you think of Quartering Act, you want to put a house. Okay, because this is the one where they could come and live in your house. Okay? This is the one where they could come and live in your house. Okay? And then Stamp Act. They're going to boycott that. They're going to have protests. The Stamp Act is really what inspires no taxation without representation. Okay? Like living quarters. Yes, exactly. So quarters is actually a military term. Like if you ever join the military, it'll say, you'll use the word quarters for the place that you're living. So you're like your living quarters. So that'll be the barracks are the quarters. So the word Quartering Act comes from the military term quarters as the place you are living. Okay, not the money. I know that's a little bit confusing. So it's really good too when you see quartering or quarter, like you're going to put the little house. Okay, so that'll help you remember Quartering Act is about living. Okay, where people are living. And this is going to be a big one because it's going to come back as we start talking about the Bill of Rights. No taxation without representation. We talked about this already. Just keep in mind with this one that it's not that they hate all taxes, is that the without representation part is really important. Super boss, you just need to know the order. Super boss, you just need to know the order. Okay. So let me talk about, so the committees of correspondence is created first, and they just are writing letters and saying, hey, here's some ideas for protests. The Sons of Liberty are the group that's like, we're going to do the protests. And they're the ones who engage in the civil disobedience. They're going to organize the Boston Tea Party. The Sons of Liberty is an actual group that would be like, they would have a symbol and they would post the symbol somewhere, and it would mean that they're going to meet that night, and they would get together and they would do protests or engage in acts of civil disobedience. Okay, so these people are just talking about things, and these people are doing things. And a lot of them are the same. Like Sam Adams is here, Sam Adams is here. Remember, Sam Adams founds the Sons of Liberty, okay? And that should be right here in your notes, founded by Sam Adams. And they organize boycotts and protests. So then we're going to actually skip all the way to the Tea Act. This little trio set right here is a pretty big deal, okay? Tea Act, Boston Tea Party, Intolerable Acts. These things kind of cascade off each other. Like when two people are fighting and it's like, well, she did this, so I did this. So she did this, so I did this. And it escalates to the point of a fight. So it starts with the Tea Act, okay? We're going to tax this tea. Okay, well, we're going to have a civil disobedience. The Sons of Liberty organizes a civil disobedience act in the Boston Harbor. And it's important that it's in Boston because the punishment is mostly for Boston. So the Boston Tea Party happens as a response to the Tea Act. So we don't like your Tea Act, we're going to throw your tea in the water. Okay. That guy, same answer as Super Boss. You don't need to memorize the dates. You just need to know the order. Especially you need to know that the proclamation line is first and the DOI is last. The Declaration of Independence is last. Okay. So you need to know proclamation line is first, DOI is last. And honestly, when you do that, whenever you see the proclamation line, like I would go ahead and draw like the Appalachian Mountains with a line and then like a stop sign. That's just, if you're a visual person, that's something you can draw on your test to help you remember that it's the Appalachian Mountains, okay? It's across it's Appalachian Mountains and it makes you stop. All right? So the Tea Act happens, and so the Tea Act causes the Boston Tea Party. Remember, in our TEACS question, it specifically said you need to know the causes and effects of the Boston Tea Party, where the cause of the Boston Tea Party is the Tea Act, and the effect of the Boston Tea Party is the Intolerable Acts. So it goes Tea Act, Boston Tea Party, Intolerable Acts. And the Intolerable Acts are a punishment. A punishment. And they're one of those difficult things because they have multiple parts. So first of all, intolerable means cannot be tolerated. Okay. So like if I say your behavior is intolerable, that means I'm not going to allow that behavior. So the intolerable acts are literally like the worst, most terrible acts that you could get. Okay. They're terrible. And you'll notice they're the last of the acts. Okay. Because after the intolerable acts, we're going to get into starting to fight. No, Leanne, the Townshend Acts are separate. So the Townshend Acts are down here. Okay, they're on like lead and glass and things like that. The Intolerable Acts, their other name is the Coercive Acts. But we almost completely know them as the Intolerable Acts. Okay, just kind of fun history facts. They're really called the Coercive Acts. You're welcome. Okay, so the Intolerable Acts kind of have three parts. Okay, only in this chat, Lucas. All right, so the Intolerable Acts have three parts. The first is to stop imports and exports. If you're confused about what imports and exports are, yes, the Intolerable Act is exactly like a punishment for the Boston Tea Party. It's, hey, you just threw millions of dollars of tea into the harbor. You need to pay for that. And Boston's all like, no, we ain't paying for that, yo. And they're like, okay, fine, we're going to punish you. Okay. It's just like when in class, like you do something and the teacher says, stop doing that. And instead of just like you say, no, I wasn't doing that. And then so you're getting punished for okay. So now I'm going to punish you really harsh because you're saying you didn't do it. a way to remember what exports and imports are, okay? They both have the word ports in them. Imports is in, exports is out. Just like your ex-boyfriend is totally out. And your new boyfriend is totally important. Imports are in, exports are out. But they stop both imports and exports, okay? They stop all trading in and out, and they close the Boston Harbor. The second thing that they're going to do is they're going to increase quartering. So they're going to put a whole bunch more soldiers into people's houses. Yes, X also can mean like exit. Okay. They're going to increase quartering. And remember, when we see quartering, we draw our little house. So they're increasing the number of people who are living in the people's houses. And the last thing it's going to do is it's going to end town meetings. Now, that might not seem like a big deal, but remember, town meetings are how they're doing self-government. So it's saying you don't get self-government anymore. It's taking away their self-government. So, and that's sort of like the worst thing you can do to the colonists, okay? That's like the most important thing to them, is being able to make their own decisions and govern themselves. So these are the three things the Intolerable Act does. Well, yes, technically the town meetings were reduced to only one time per year, but they also had to be approved. So it's easier to just think of them as like no town meetings. It's usually just easier if you just think of it as no town meetings. Okay. So that's one of those nuances. So there was the Intolerable Acts. Okay. Okay, yeah, the American Revolution was first, because America can't fight in a world war if America doesn't exist. Okay. All right. So then you have the first battle. I wouldn't worry too much about that. Propaganda, and then it ends with the DOI. So the DOI is last, the Declaration of Independence. And we're going to spend a lot of time on the DOI next week. And again, in a couple weeks. It's a very, very important. It is a hot date. Okay, so that's 1776 year. You don't need to know it for this test, but you will need to know it. It is a hot date. So the Declaration of Independence. All right, let's look at the people. And I know mine looks a little bit different than yours. Yours is in a nice, neat chart. Mine's all over the place. So a couple of big ones. Patrick Henry. Give me liberty or give me death. Okay, I like to draw a little stick figure of him standing like majestically, giving his speech. And that's Patrick Henry. Okay. Patty H, that's what a lot of my students were calling him, is Patty H. Okay, super play. The First Continental Congress is just a meeting of a bunch of representatives from the colonies. 12 out of the 13 colonies show up and they have a meeting. Long term, what's important about the First Continental Congress is that it helps unite the colonies. So you remember how the colonies, way back, poor Benny Franklin, they rejected his Albany Plan of Union. Okay. So it's sort of like Albany Plan of Union in 1761. I'm okay, Chloe. Thanks for asking, though. Albany Plan of Union in 1761, and then the Continental Congress. First Continental Congress. Okay. And I can't even remember what the year is. 1775, I believe. It's either 4 or 5. This is the colonies saying, no, We don't want to be unified. And here the colonies say, let's all work together. So when you're thinking about how big of an impact all these taxes and everything have, and all this taxation without representation, and how much they feel like their rights are being away, is, you guys, this is only a 13-year difference. Okay? This is only a 13-year difference. Colton, no, you don't need to know the dates. You just need to know the order things happen in. This is the only reason I wrote the dates on here, is just to show you that there's a 13-year difference, and that's it. But in 13 years, all this stuff happens. All this stuff happens over 13 years, and it gets them so angry, and they feel so much like their rights are being violated, that they go from being like, no, we don't want to be together, to yes, let's work together, over 13 years. Okay? So let's get back to these people. And then remember, I'm just choosing to focus on a couple of them for this review. Okay. Just checking my notes. Okay, so let's put a star by a couple of these. Let's put a star by old Patty H. Okay. Benjamin Franklin, Samuel Adams, TJ and T-Pain. Okay. Don't get TJ and T-Pain confused. It's difficult because they're both writers. Like TJ, we talk about writing the Declaration of Independence. T-Pain, we're talking about writing Common Sense. Yeah, super play. Yes, the Boston Tea Party is reaction to the Tea Act. Yes, Otto Ben. That's an interesting point. It's 1 year per colony to get them all convinced. Okay, so strategies for the people. It's kind of hard because it sort of depends on how you learn and everything. I'm really big on little sketches and doodles, so I do a lot of those. Like, even if it's just remembering Patty or making up nicknames for them, like I call them TJ and T-Pain. Okay. Yes, super play. They threw tea into the ocean on the Boston Tea Party. Crispus Attucks, a star by him. So I call him TJ and T-Pain. TJ's easy to remember in a couple months because we'll be talking about him from now until February. Like, he goes, Super Boss, I'm going to mute you because you keep asking me questions I can't answer. Please stop asking me about what's on the test and just focus on what we're talking about here. Okay? All right. So, I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought here. Okay, so the people I put a star by are Samuel Adams, Patrick Henry, Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine, Ben Franklin, and Crispus Attucks. Okay, so Crispus Attucks, a lot of people have been talking about how his name sounds like Christmas. I always think it sounds like something's crisp. Okay, he's the first African American to die for his country. His last name kind of looks like attacks, and he gets attacked. So Crispus attacked. Crispus Attucks. You can kind of remember that. Crispus attacked. Crispus Attucks. Okay. Ben Franklin, we've already talked about him during this live stream. So again, he's coming back again. We see him in the French and Indian War. We see him here again. You've got to just remember that he makes the Albany Plan of Union. Okay. Ben Franklin does the Albany Plan of Union. The APU, Albany Plan of Union, however you want to remember that, but that's Ben Franklin. And some of these I don't have a cutesy thing for, unfortunately. You just got to remember Ben Franklin does the Albany Plan of Union. TJ as the Declaration of Independence. TJDOI, and we'll call the Declaration of Independence the DOI quite a bit. When anytime you see his name, maybe you put over the, Thomas is DOI, but Thomas Jefferson, you can't get him confused with Thomas Paine, who writes the Common Sense. Okay, who writes Common Sense. Okay. And I don't know, apparently there's a rapper named T-Pain. So if you think of T-Pain, it's Common Sense. Averill, the Albany Plan of Union is Benjamin Franklin's plan to unify the colonies, to get all the colonies together against France. To unify the colonies against France. Okay. The idea that the colonies need to band together to fight against the French and get control of North America. Okay, the colonies need to band together to fight against the French. Sam Adams, okay, he's the leader of the Sons of Liberty. So Sam Adams, Sons of Liberty. Okay, he's kind of the bad boy of this group. He engages in civil disobedience. The Sons of Liberty is sort of like a rebel group. So if you think Sam Adams like a rebel, okay, so Sam Adams is a rebel. He has a really short name. You can call him Sam Adams. Oh, sorry, they're doing a lights check thing. My lights might go off in just a second. If they do, I'll just run over and turn them on. Okay. I think that pretty much covers the people I wanted to talk about. Okay, good. All right, and on our last page, last 2 pages, we have our quiz. What I was telling my students are any questions you missed, you want to pay special attention to. Okay, any questions you missed. And you notice how the questions on the back, on the top, these questions were, these questions were just put them in order. That's because you don't have to know the dates. You just need to put them in order. Okay? You don't have to know the dates. You just have to put them in order. For those topics. Okay. And then last week's warm-up. This is a really, really useful warm-up to talk about our last 2 topics we need to talk about that are from Unit 1 and 2, which are mercantilism and salutary neglect. Okay, so mercantilism and salutary neglect are our 2 last topics to think about. And if you're confused on those, this is a really great resource for you. So if you're confused on those, go back to this warm-up from last week. It should say 10:7 to 10:11 on it. It's the one where we put the 2 little pictures at the bottom and you had to do titles for those. But these questions on the back are super good. Like, what British policy allowed the colonists to develop their own systems of trade and representative government? And that's salutary neglect. And then number 4, what's the purpose behind the British policy of taxation? And that's to increase revenue. There's that word revenue for money. Repay debt. One reason for colonists opposed to taxes, they were not given any representation to vote on it. Okay, so all these are really, really good questions to bring us back to these concepts of salutary neglect and mercantilism and all of those things. Salutary neglect, let's start with that. It was happening for 150 years and it was keeping us happy. Salutary neglect is a good thing. We like it, okay? And we always try to think of salutary neglect as like sunglasses. Okay, like the King of England is wearing sunglasses. So he's not seeing what's going on. He's like not paying attention to the colonies. Okay. So it's the king is not paying attention to the colonies. So they do what they want. That means they get to do what they want. And they get used to that, guys. It happens for 150 years. For 150 years, they're used to making their own decisions, having self-government, having representative government, having their own trade, doing what they want to do. So when salutary neglect ends and mercantilism starts, this is like when salutary neglect ends. Okay? And it's going to make them very not happy. Okay? They're very not happy. And that's going to be trade laws and restrictions. And it's going to be all those taxes. Okay. So mercantilism creates a bitter feeling between Britain and the colonies. The colonies get very mad about mercantilism. They're like, I want to be able to do what I want to do. We want to make our own decisions. We want to make our own economic decisions. Okay? Mercantilism is about money. It's about economics. So I know that Chloe, yeah, he's not paying attention, partially because he doesn't care. And remember, we're really talking 150 years, so we're talking about 3 or 4. Oh, I'll be right back. We're really talking about 3 or 4 different kings in this time period, but all of them don't really care, and they're distracted by other things. They have more important things going on than paying attention to these little colonies way across the ocean, 3,000 miles away. So they don't start paying attention to the colonies until they need money from them. Okay, just like sometimes you don't pay attention to your parents until you need money from them. Okay, you've got other things going on. You're a very busy person. You know, your parents can do what they want to do, and you'll figure it out once you'll pay attention to them once you need some money. Okay, so that's salutary neglect. And then mercantilism is all about economics. It's all about you cannot do what you want to do. You're going to have to pay taxes. We're going to tell you what to do. And so it makes them very upset. They're not happy about it. Okay? It causes bitterness and bad feelings. Leo, when you say they, who do you mean they? Do you mean the king let salutary neglect happen? Yeah, the king, it was a policy that they had, the policy of salutary neglect, where they just sort of ignored what was going on. If you mean the colonists let it happen, well, the colonists love salutary neglect. It's great. Okay, this is like when you have a teacher who doesn't enforce the rules. Okay, and like, yeah, you're not supposed to have cell phones out in school, but that teacher doesn't care. That's salutary neglect. Salutary actually literally means like good or positive. Okay. Avril, yes, the only king whose name we ever learn. The only king whose name we learned this entire school year is King George III. He is the only king we will ever learn, is King George III. And he happens during this big, giant, long timeline. He is king during all of this. But he is not king before. He actually becomes king in hold upside down. He becomes king in 1761. So this is what he's... Okay, and he's king during all of that. He's king during all of that, okay? But he's not king, so this is him not being king, not king, not king, not king. King George III. Random other kings, we don't need to know their names. They're not that important. They're, King George III. Okay, this is why we consider King George III the tyrant. George Washington isn't really that big a deal yet. Obviously, he's going to become a really big deal when we talk about the American Revolution itself and actually talk about the war and the battles and things like that. But right now, he's just sort of hanging out and talking to people. But the only thing you really need to know about George Washington is he's going to become leader of the army. He is going to become leader of the army. That's where we're going to next. That's the pathway we are on. Okay, so we have one more thing or I guess actually 2 more things I want to talk about before I'm done. The first one is the Great Awakening, because we noticed in our text questions that the Great Awakening is mentioned, okay? And that is in an older, so I'm going to go back and find my Great Awakening notes. I have them on page 30 and 31, okay? And the biggest thing with the Great Awakening is we remember it's choice and voice. Choice and voice. So because I have a religious awakening to have a political voice, and I tell all my students, they start to question the king. Okay, they start to question the king. You know what? Maybe all this thing we've been doing this whole time, maybe that's not the best idea in the world. Okay, maybe that's not the best idea in the world. Okay, so everything we've been doing this whole time, maybe that's not the best idea. So that's where we're going to be going with the political voice, religious choice and political voice. That's the Great Awakening. And it's just a quick reminder. We learned about this in the last unit, but it does help pave the way. Somebody asked me why the Great Awakening is not on the thermometer. And I want you to think of it like this. If you are planting a garden, the first thing you have to do is pull up all of the grass that's where you want to plant it, right? So you have to clear the ground. Then after you've done that, then you can start the steps of planting. You can dig the hole, put the seed in, all of that. Okay. Okay. So all of that. So the Great Awakening like prepares the ground. And then all of the stuff on the thermometer is like the planting of the seeds and the actual steps that lead us there, okay? So this is kind of preparing us mentally. It makes us start to question the king. The Great Awakening makes us start to question the king, okay? Religious choice and political voice for the Great Awakening. And the last thing I want to mention was our most missed question from our last test. Our most missed question from our last test was about the Magna Carta, and it was a pretty confusing question. It had a box in it and everything. It had a box in it and everything, and it was talking about the first bullet point in the box said self-government, and like everybody picked the answer Mayflower Compact. But the Magna Carta, we always want to remember, the only one of these that directly deals with the king, the only one of these that directly deals with the king is the Magna Carta. Okay? And so we can remember the Magna Carta by drawing our little king, and then I like to put a little ball and chain on him because he's being limited. Okay? So it limits the powers of the king. Okay, super play. So the Great Awakening, you want to remember choice and voice. The voice in politics leads them to start questioning the king. And just for clarification, everyone is equal in the eyes of God. Not everyone is equal to God. God is still supreme over everybody else in the colonies at that time period. But the Great Awakening says everyone is equal in the eyes of God. Okay, so that's just a quick minor clarification there. But there was a Magna Carta, you just remember that limits the power of the king. Okay, that is all I have to cover. So I want to remind you that you do have this Unit 3 TEKS questions that are an excellent resource for you to look at and see if you can answer the questions. So I'll be, if anybody has any questions right now that they would like to ask, we have about 10 minutes or so for whatever questions you may have. Good question. Let me type the Quizlet link in. Let me look it up real quick. Quizlet.com. Log in. Cause American Revolution. Share it. Get the link. Copy the link. Come over here. Paste it in. And that is the link to the Quizlet. So that you can use the Quizlet as a tool for studying as well. So the Great Awakening helped prepare people for the American Revolution because it made them start to question the king. Okay, you can't have a revolution if everybody thinks king is absolutely should be the supreme ruler. So in the Great Awakening, when everyone's thinking about the fact that all these people are supposed to be equal in the eyes of God, then they start to question, well, if everybody's equal, why do we even have a king? And so once people start to ask that question, when the king starts to become a tyrant, they are willing to think about, well, if we have a tyrant for a king, maybe we should just get rid of that king. You're welcome, Sparky. Any other questions? Avril, yeah, only the Declaration of Independence is a hot date. So that's the only one you have to have memorized. You just need to know the order, the general order, okay? And like I said, really emphasizing that the proclamation line is first and the Declaration of Independence is last. So the proclamation line is first and the Declaration of Independence is last. So just really emphasizing those two pieces of the order. Superplay, not yet. That'll really be on the next test. We start to introduce it here, but Lexington and Concord is on the second test, for sure. Yes, Kim, absolutely. So the committees of correspondence were to organize the boycotts. So, hey, everybody, we're all going to boycott sugar. Make sure you're boycotting sugar too, because the more people who boycott something, the better the effect is. Because, like, if I decide I'm going to boycott Walmart, Walmart does not care if I boycott them. That's one customer. They've got like 5 million. If I can convince the entire city of Houston to boycott Walmart, and they all do, Walmart is much more likely to give me what I want because now they're really losing money by losing the entire city of Houston. So the more people you can get to boycott with you, the more effective, the more your boycott works. And just remember that boycotts are a form of peaceful protest. So they were very, very popular at the time period because most people wanted peaceful protests, nonviolent, peaceful protests. Okay, it doesn't seem like there's any more questions, and we're about to hit 1 hour. So I'm going to go ahead and call an is it. I'm going to wait and see if Superplay wants to elaborate on those two words. But then I'm going to go ahead and probably call it for the evening. Thanks for joining us. I know it was a busy night tonight. There's a lot going on, cross-country meets and choir concerts. Is there anything over civil disobedience? Well, I can't tell you what's on the test, but if there's anything over civil disobedience, it's going to be about the Boston Tea Party. Because the Boston Tea Party is the only act of civil disobedience we talk about in this unit. It's a very important act of civil disobedience, one of the first acts of civil disobedience in our country. But it's just going to be the Boston Tea Party. So just make sure you know that the Boston Tea Party is an act of civil disobedience. Just know what the Boston Tea Party is. Superplay, new. The committees of correspondence only talk about what the British are doing in the way of like, well, let's respond to them. So like, hey, the British just passed an act about tea. Let's all boycott tea. So because they did this, let's all do this. Okay? It's like their anti-British club. Like, let's all hate Britain. And let's write about how we hate Britain to each other. And what we're going to do about the fact that we hate Britain. Stupid Britain. Yeah, going against the king. Exactly. Thanks, Chloe. I will say, if any of my choir students are watching this later, I'm really enjoying hearing your concert in the background. Thanks, Superplay. Y'all have a great night. And good luck on the test.